Stay tuned now for Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome, everybody, to Westchester Eye on the Radio. I'm Peter Moses with Ardina Seward. John Sharan is going to be off for a while. We don't know exactly when he's going to be back. He has some personal things he's working through right now. How are you, Ardina?
I'm doing well on this lovely fall day.
I just saw your daughter for the first time in 22 years.
That's right, the lovely Caitlin Seward. She came along.
She's changed since she was 9 years old.
Yeah, she got taller. Hold on, we have to switch mics, I'm being told.
Yes.
You'll be able to hear me.
All right, so we do have a guest. Ardina can hear me even though she's...
okay.
She's
now I have plopped down in my
but
seat.
She can't hear the guest.
And I'm heard better.
We have with us a guest today named Victor Avila. I'm not sure if you pronounce it Avila or Avila. And he's a former ICE agent who was seriously injured, and his partner was murdered in an 2011 ambush by a very well-known drug cartel called Los Zetas. And this happened in Mexico, where he had been stationed. How are you today?
I'm doing really good. Thank you for having me on.
And how do you pronounce your last name, Avila or Avila?
It's Avila.
Avila. Peter was right. Peter had the correct pronunciation. So all those years of Spanish, it just shows you, Victor, I learned nothing.
It's a very good pronunciation, Peter.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I spent a lot of my news career in the Bronx, and I grew up in a community that was very mixed, whereas Ardina grew up in lily white Mamaroneck.
No, my neighborhood was not lily white. My neighborhood was basically low income blacks and Italians.
Okay, but you still did not meet many Hispanics back then. You didn't. No. You can shake your head all you want, but
we were all
I knew how to
boat.
pronounce the name because I grew up with a lot of Hispanics, and you did not. Anyway, getting away from that, the reason why we're having Victor on the show today is that what has gone on with him is a national disgrace, and it's one that, with the current administration, you'd think they would jump through all the hoops to make sure that he was properly
accommodated, which he hasn't. Now remember that this started under the Obama administration.
I know, and they did a disgraceful job.
Well, basically, Victor.
They abandoned him.
And
the family of his.
And they scarred the memory of Jaime Zapata, and it's a. I can't swear on the air, but it is a blank shame. It's terrible. I mean, this is a man who gave two men who gave
his full. They gave their full measure,
120% for the country, and the country turned around and gave them jack.
Not the country, the politicians.
The politicians turned around and gave them jack. I mean, we're going to get into the particulars of the incident, but as Peter said, Victor is a former ICE agent. He was riding in a car with his partner. February 15th, it was 2011.
Valentine's Day.
February 4th, February 15th.
Okay.
They were on a special mission, a covert mission. They were riding in an SUV, $160,000 SUV that was bulletproof. They were in Querétaro. They were between Querétaro and San Potosí, Mexico, in the car. Then they were surrounded by a group of drug cartel members. What they did not know at the time was that when the vehicle is put in park, then the doors automatically unlock. Jaime Zapata rolled down the window a fraction because the car had DPL plates on it. That was the cover that they were using. Jaime Zapata rolled down the window to tell them that we are not the enemy, we are diplomats. And the cartel members then proceeded to use the 2-inch leverage that they had between the window and that space. They put guns in that window and they assassinated Jaime Zapata. Victor was also wounded at the same time, badly wounded, and he called for help. Remember that Jaime was driving, so now you have
But let's remember the sick irony of this is that the weapons that they used were weapons that the U.S. government had given to Mexico.
And we're going to get into that. It was called the Fast and Furious program. Right. So we're going to get into that but I just want to let the audience know.
When we're setting it up, I think that needs to be in people's minds, because they were shot with guns provided by the U.S. government that were supposed to be used to fight the war on drugs, not for drug warlords to use to kill American agents. Now, we're going to be going to break in a very few seconds, and I'm sure Mr. Avila is going to stay on the line. This is going to be a Fox News and Fox Business News break. It is a long break, but I do want to say that that this is a national disgrace that was started by the Obama administration, and President Trump and his Republican minions have done nothing to pick up the ball and clear up this terrible injustice. And we'll be right back after these messages. This is Westchester Eye on the radio on WVOX and WVOX.com. Please don't go away. This is an important story.
1960 WVOX. Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Embassy, switch for office.
This is Victor Avila from ICE. We are shot. We are on the highway to Querétaro, Mexico. We've been shot and attacked on the highway. I am an ICE special agent.
What is your name, you said, sir?
Victor Avila. Please call Jerry Miles. I don't have another phone.
Where did you look?
Please call Jerry Miles. We've been shot on the highway.
Highway? What is the highway, sir? To where?
Mexico, Querétaro. They know where I'm at.
Okay.
Well, that was the sound of Victor. That was the sound of Victor Avila, who was shot along with his partner Jaime Zapata. Jaime was killed. Victor survived. He was badly wounded. But while all this was going on, now Victor had a dilemma, because he had to get out of that situation. Jaime was in the driver's seat, and there was no way to move Jaime.
And he was dead.
And he was dead. So Victor had to literally press Jaime's leg to the accelerator.
Well, let him explain.
Okay, Jaime, you explain it. Victor, you explain it. I'm all.
The time of the phone call. Obviously, it was actually two parts to the shooting. That was the initial barrage of bullets that they did when they introduced those two guns on my side, an AK-47 and a handgun. And so when we actually then try to escape, I do put my hand on Jaime's leg to accelerate our Suburban, that then crashes one of the SUVs of the cartel members that are blocking us. It crashes it, but the SUV just kind of then just goes into the median, and I try to pull the Suburban back by steering it back on the highway, but it ends up staying right there. You can see pictures of that online. And that's when I pick up my phone. I had several phones on me. One didn't work, and the one you hear the call is from my BlackBerry back then. And I called the dispatch, which is the Post 1 at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. At this point, we're on a Highway 57, about 4.5, 5 hours away north of Mexico City.
And how long did it take for help to arrive? My understanding was that 100 rounds were fired in the first and the second incident. So how long did it take for help to arrive to get you guys out of there?
We were there for approximately 40 minutes, which, as you can imagine, is an eternity. The second part of it, after they fired the first one of the SUVs turned around, came back, and did a U-turn and parked right in front of the Suburban. Two of the shooters get out right in front of the Suburban in the hood, and with their AK-47s, look at me, I look at them, and they start spraying the front windshield of the Suburban with bullets, and I just kind of freeze there. They run back into the SUV and leave, and so I continue to make. I realized at that point that the windshield protected me, but I hadn't actually realized that I had been shot. I was shot once in my chest and twice in my left leg. And it wasn't until I was on the phone with U.S. personnel, with the U.S. diplomatic security agents and other ICE agents that were at the U.S. Embassy, that one of my coworkers told me to physically check myself, and that's the first time I realized I had been wounded.
Now, And when we come back from our break, we're still 4 minutes before the break. I want to talk about the aftermath. But in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, did protocols change over what to do in a situation like that? Like not opening the window at all, because then maybe nobody would have been shot. I mean, did things change as a result of the ambush that you endured?
Yes, and that's a great question, Peter. I actually hardly get asked that question because, for example, I had never driven an armored vehicle before. I actually never got any tactical training or any training whatsoever. When I arrived to Mexico, they put me in a car and here you go, navigate it and learn how to deal with it. But a lot of things, and the key word here is not immediately. It wasn't immediately. It took a while before these protocols to take place. But now, if you get assigned to go to Mexico, you will receive training to how to maneuver and deal with an armored vehicle. Now you will get additional training as such. Now the Suburbans cannot unlock when you place them in park. A lot of things have changed, but there was a lot of problems with the Suburbans at that time there. It has a PA system, it had a siren, and it had a GPS tracker installed on it. Specifically for instances like this, it was a toggle switch that would immediately send a signal, a distress signal to Washington, D.C. It didn't work. It hadn't been working for months. And I hit the toggle switch, and it sent the signal to Washington, D.C. 8 hours after.
Oh, my God.
So there was just a lot of things that went wrong, equipment-wise, and of course, with the settings of the Suburban. But luckily, a lot of those things have now been changed. But you talk about protocols, they had no idea what to do when an ICE agent is killed or injured in the line of duty outside of the country. That protocol was never, ever, I was the guinea pig. I got the short end of the stick because of that, because my agency just didn't know what to do.
Is it a stretch to say that those mistakes cost Jaime Zapata his life?
Okay, yeah, of course. That mistake, being on the road to begin with, we could talk about the alert that was issued by the U.S. ambassador and to all U.S. Embassy employees just 3 weeks before. It was the second alert that he had issued, and that one specifically prohibited any personnel, whether for business or pleasure, to drive on that highway because we knew.
And you guys were never informed.
The intelligence was clear that it was very dangerous to be on that road because that road was being controlled by the Zetas cartel. We all knew that. I knew that at the time of the assignment. I challenged the assignment, and yet my supervisors in Mexico decided to still send us that way without any.
But why? The question. But why? What was the justification?
They wanted this equipment, Peter, that we went to go pick up from our counterparts, ICE agents from the Monterrey U.S. consulate. And they wanted this equipment, and they wanted it now. And I asked them to bring it via diplomatic pouch, fly it in. There's many other ways that we could do it, and they just denied all those requests. They said, in the words of my deputy attaché, Anthony Salisbury, he said that he wasn't aware of any security issues in Mexico, and he wanted that equipment by close of business day the next day. And that's it.
Did he?
When you order, you order.
Did he lose his job?
No one's lost their job. They've only been promoted.
Nothing happened to the people who approved this. Nothing happened to them.
Nothing. No accountability.
This gets more and more.
Frustrating and angering.
Yeah, I feel angry. I mean, I know you're angry, but I feel enraged that this is what has happened to you. And I mean, we're going to talk about this more on the other side of the break, and I hope that the audience stays with us. And you can also call in at 914-636-0110 if you want to call or comment. But hang in there. Victor Avila has hung in there, and he needs our support. ICE needs our support. Stay with us. Here we are again. We are into our second half hour of our show with Victor Avila, who is a former ICE agent who was shot, and We are discussing the
There was
circumstances
an attempted
of
assassination.
attempted assassination. Yeah, I was trying to kind of make it a little bit softer, but there ain't no way of doing it. So, Victor, we talked a lot about the shooting itself. What happened afterwards? Take us through
The aftermath.
Take us through your feelings and what was done or what was not done for you.
It was the aftermath. I always refer to it as sometimes I think is worse than the actual shooting that I went through. Immediately, I was shipped from the hospital in Mexico. We were airlifted to a hospital in Texas. Then eventually, my family had to be extracted from Mexico in a very unique fashion because there was a threat to my home where I lived in Mexico City, where I was assigned. And so they had to get taken out in a very traumatizing way. Eventually, we reunited. And
Where did you reunite?
In El Paso, Texas. That's where I'm originally from.
Okay.
And we met there. I finally got to see my wife and kids. And we were deemed unsafe to be anywhere near the southern border. So they said, we're going to have you go do your physical therapy and all that in Washington, D.C. And I was okay with that. That's fine. But it's probably one of the worst times of our life, if not the worst, where, I got a cell phone issued to me, and they dropped me off at a hotel and for a couple of weeks and said, okay, here you go. Call us if you need anything. Well, I never went back to my house. I needed a toothbrush. I needed a lot of things. My kids needed school
And you were
supplies.
still
were in school.
And you were recovering from a physical injury and having to deal with the emotional reaction to what happened to you and to your partner. Bardina and I both covered NYPD for a very long time, and we know what partnerships are like within police agencies. But I imagine when you're overseas in a country that is at war with itself vis-a-vis the drug gangs, that the relationship you had with your partner must have gone well beyond what we knew.
Well, I met him. I met him the day before. I met Jaime the day before.
Oh,
that's
so you just met him.
The whole thing is that I met him, and I felt like I knew him all my life because he shared some intimate details about his life and personal details about what was going on with him and his fiancée and his life in Texas and what he aspired to do in his career. Jaime reminded me a lot about myself. As a border agent, hardworking agent, and wanting to do better in his career. And so I learned a lot from him in the short period of time that I knew him, and really connected with him incredibly. And I have those memories to share for a long, long time, and share that with the family, which I do, the Zapata family. But you talk about PTSD, the depression, the anxiety, all that hit me. That all hit me really, really hard. And I'm in a wheelchair, and
Whoa! You're in a wheelchair for life?
No. I was in a wheelchair for about 3 months, and until I finally was able to recover to continue walking, and my leg was better, and I'm fully recovered now. But the point being there that I was looking for a place to live. It was just a very, very, very a lot of things that happened to me that eventually down the line I was given a 3R letter, which the government means either resign, retire, or relocate. We had been shipped overseas again, and for all intents and purposes, were kicked out. And they told me, you have to come back to the U.S. and pick a city to live in. And I fought that assignment, and they issued this 3R letter. So I had no choice to either resign, relocate, or retire. So at that point, I relocated. I never asked for the government to give me any special treatment whatsoever. I just wanted something to take care of me and my family. But that never happened. And eventually, the shooting happened in 2011. So by 2015, I was in a very awkward situation. I was in a workers' comp type of situation, and my agency was not offering the position. So they didn't want me back. And at that point, I didn't want to go back. And so I took a medical retirement in May of 2015.
And this happened under Obama's watch. Let's talk about the Fast and Furious program for about 5 minutes.
Yes. So if the listeners don't know what Fast and Furious is, it's Operation Fast and Furious out of Arizona. It's the operation that ATF led, and it was a task force. There was FBI, DEA, and even ICE as part of this task force. But the whole purpose of this operation was to identify gun traffickers, weapons traffickers, and arrest them. But the failed operation here and the big screw-up of this operation was that they allowed these guns to be purchased in the United States and then what we call walked or allowed to go south to Mexico without any detection whatsoever after that. They never made an effort to contact the government of Mexico or to continue the investigation into Mexico to really take down what they say they wanted to do, is take down the bigger fish or the bigger organizations of these weapons trafficking organizations.
Have they done, by the way, have they done anything since? Do you know? I mean, I'm sure you still keep in touch with some of your old friends. Have they changed the protocols?
Still going on. Maybe not under Operation Fast and Furious, but there are still weapons that are being walked south. Just a couple of weeks ago, one of Operation Fast and Furious guns was detected in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico, in a crime scene. Another one was detected in the shooting in France. Remember that horrific mass shooting?
Yes.
Well, one of the weapons there was a Fast and Furious gun.
Wow.
Two of the weapons used against us in our shooting was out of a gun walking operation that stemmed from Arizona into Texas, and two of those weapons that were walked were used against us by the cartels.
So basically, your partner was. Let me interrupt for a second, just so the audience understands. Your partner was killed by a gun that was supplied by the United States government.
Yes, it was. The ATF was using what we call straw purchasers, clean people to buy these guns, giving them to the bad guys. The bad guys would then take them down south. They were supplying the cartels with them, and then killed numerous, hundreds, possibly thousands of Mexican nationals. We all know what's going on in Mexico right now. And so, and the way this whole thing broke is when one of the weapons that was recovered when Border Patrol Agent Brian Terry was murdered in December of 2010.
You joined ICE for what reason?
I wanted to make a difference in my community, and eventually I wanted to make a difference for my country.
And sorry, go ahead, Peter.
And do you still believe in ICE's mission, at least as it pertains to Mexico?
It's a little failed, but I do support ICE. I do stand behind in their mission. It's an agency that exists. Remember, there's a customs aspect of it. It's not just immigration. There's a lot of things that ICE does.
By the way, who's ever playing music behind you, can you have them, or can you turn the music down so we can just hear you?
But the thing is, you were treated.
Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
You were treated.
He didn't get a chance.
Oh, sorry.
to
Go
answer.
ahead and finish.
So go ahead, please answer.
No, I was just saying I support ICE. I stand with ICE. I do not. What happened to me and the management and the failures of the directors of the agency, I don't attribute that to the men and women that are now trying to enforce the laws. They're out there trying to do a job, especially in this day and age with the atmosphere of the abolished ICE and all the stuff that they're having to deal with. We still need them. We need the border enforcement. It's not going to go away, and we need them to continue doing their jobs every day.
And you support the wall, correct?
I support the wall. Yeah, it's just another tool that the wall is not to solve all, take care of everything, but it's definitely a tool. Listen, I work down there in El Paso in East Hudspeth County, where it's wide open, and we used to have backpackers, smugglers carrying hundreds of pounds of marijuana, cocaine, vehicles driving right through the river. Smugglers, you name it, all happening through there, also within the port of entry as well. I don't want to ignore that part either. But a wall would have been very nice to have there, or some kind of a big barrier, and it would eliminate all of that traffic and really focus to really channel and bring those individuals to a port of entry. We know that a lot of stuff comes through the port of entry, and we could focus more on detecting them at that point.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I'm sure Ardina.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, because when most of us think about ICE agents, we think about, the rough and tumble that we read about and see on cable television and read about it in newspapers. And you sound like a very reasoned man, a very kind man. And it's good to hear from someone with your background, even though the reason why you're on the show is just absolutely horrific. We're going to go to break now. This is our last break before we go to our final quarter hour. This is Westchester Eye on the radio on WVOX and WVOX.com. We will be right back. Please don't go anywhere. Thanks. After he was caught in an ambush 5 hours north of Mexico City when he was an ICE agent. Now, I'd like to focus now on your aftercare and what the government hasn't done for you, and that you have a lawsuit about that. So please tell us about what happened in the aftermath.
My physical care and mental health care has been great. That I have no complaint about. I have been able to. I have my doctors and my counseling and all that has been great. What hasn't been is the fact that we've been asking the government for documents to be able to show. You mentioned the lawsuit. The lawsuit is no longer there. It has been completely dismissed. It was dismissed in portions, and the last portion of it was dismissed this past May.
Okay.
And the reason why is because the district judge was just waiting for us to provide documents, but we were in a catch-22. We can't get the documents, so we don't have any to give to the court. And to this day, we either get redacted sheets of paper or other things that are not related to what we're asking for, because President Obama placed an executive privilege order on all records related to Fast and Furious and my shooting, and Jaime and I and our shooting. So we're not able to get any of the documents. It's a big cover-up that not only my family, the Zapata family, but the Brian Terry family as well is trying to get these documents to have be able to review them and see exactly what went wrong here.
And I'm assuming that the Obama administration closed the books on it because they were embarrassed. This was a terrible mistake that was made on not one mistake, but several, if not more than several mistakes by the government of not being prepared for what happened, of not communicating up and down the line. I mean, your supervisor didn't even know that was a dangerous area, even though they put out a bulletin saying to avoid this area because of the danger. I mean, this was a cluster blank from start to finish.
It really is, and of course the weapons. That's the big deal. Is that this is the biggest botched operation probably ever in existence in the history of U.S. law enforcement, and there's a lot of people that should be held accountable there, and it really hasn't been. It hasn't happened, and we want that. Hopefully, this administration would lift that executive privilege order and allow us to get access to all these documents. I'm not the only one affected. There's gun shop owners. There's a lot of people in other states in Arizona and Nevada that have been personally affected by Operation Fast and Furious. And so part of my being here and being a survivor, and one of my duties is to go out there and tell the story, which I'm very grateful for giving me the platform to give and share the story so people know what's going on and what happened to us. But I'll continue to fight until we hopefully get these records and answer all our questions.
I'm going to assume that when an Obama-hating quasi-Republican, because I don't believe Trump is a real Republican, I just believe he ran for a party that had a vacuum of leadership, as do the Democrats, but it's a different kind of vacuum, that when he came in, that your case would gain some prominence because it showed the ineptitude of a failed foreign policy. And yet the Trump administration has done nothing. I haven't read anything about them trying to make this right. You'd think that they would do something, not just for you, but to bring it all back out into the open, because this was something that was debated for a long time out there. I mean, there's other media stories about this, so this is not something that was completely hidden from the American public.
No, this was out there. I mean, Attorney General Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress because of this. And so, yes, there's a lot of information, and still, the access to the information and documents is still not there. And you talk about being a failed operation and not just a foreign policy, but it really has affected what's going on in Mexico. We hear a lot right now what's going on with immigration and the wall and all this other stuff. But what's going on with the cartels down there, especially with the money that the United States provides to Mexico. When I was there, it was the Mérida Initiative. It was billions of dollars of infrastructure training. We did all of that for the government of Mexico, but yet it's becoming a failed state, especially just a few days ago, last week, when the cartel basically took over and the government kneeled before the Sinaloa cartel in that shooting. And that's the problem here, is that we are, at any moment's notice, that happening here in our country. And that's the scary part. That's the part that we need to really address, because our Middle East is right there. It's no longer, the attention should no longer be over there. It should be right here on our border, because these cartels, which I like to refer to them, and they should be designated as foreign terrorist organizations to allow the U.S. government to attack them in a different fashion. The intelligence sharing, the open investigation for 2 years is no longer being effective anymore.
No,
we need to get DOD involved and really hit them when it hurts and designate them as foreign terrorist organizations to really, really dismantle them and take them down. But really save a lot of people from this fentanyl crisis and opioid crisis.
You must, when you're not speaking diplomatically the way you are right now, you must have moments when you are unbelievably frustrated and angry.
Yeah. Well, to
and
say
express
the least,
it.
I'm in a better place now, but it was it's still an ongoing thing. The frustration is still there, anger, and it's just a matter of trying to control this. But it's been 8.5 years, so you can imagine.
What do you tell your children?
Oh, my children are so resilient. They're the most patient kids in the world. I have a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old. And they're the greatest kids that I think of in the world.
Would you ever let them work Would you ever let them work for the government if you had a choice?
Probably not. No.
And your wife worked for the government.
My wife was a contractor there when my wife's in the health industry, but she was a contractor when we were there in Mexico. And you talk about.
Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Oh, we lost you for a second. Go ahead.
My wife deserves all the credit. She's the one that stood by me and has given me the support and the rest of my family. But really, my wife and kids have been unbelievable in this journey that I'm still here. I'm not going to give up. I'm here for a reason. God chose me to stay that day. He did not take me, and so I'm here to fight until we get some kind of answers.
Going back to the original incident, how did they know? How did the drug cartel know to find you?
That's a great question. They knew we were on that road, and they knew we were Americans. I told them, I yelled at them, we're Americans, we're U.S. Embassy employees, this is a diplomatic vehicle. They testified in court in Washington, D.C. in the trial in 2017 that they heard me. They actually corroborated my story, that they knew that we were Americans, and they still decided to open fire. There have been many other U.S. agents held at gunpoint at one point or other in Mexico, but once they find out, these cartels or bad guys find out that they're Americans, they kind of step back and let them be. There's this unwritten rule ever since the murder of a DEA agent Enrique Camarena in 1985, that you just don't mess with U.S. law enforcement. Well, the Zetas cartels didn't care. As ruthless as they are, they decided to open fire that day and take Jaime's life and shoot me.
And you have a book, am I correct, that is in progress or has already been written?
No, I'm writing the book. I have a book proposal that's ready and good to go. I'm looking for a publisher. I haven't had good luck, and I have a lot of publishing companies pass on it, and I don't know why, but I think it's a good proposal. It's a professional proposal. It has a couple of chapters already written in there. And
are you doing it by yourself,
or that story done?
Are you doing it by yourself, or do you have someone working with you as a writer?
I have a person helping me, a ghostwriter helping me write it.
Oh, that's good. That's good. It's always good to have someone who that's their professional. I have another question for you. That's half related, half not related. Would you ever visit Mexico again?
Yes, I actually went back. I went back purposely with my family because we needed that part of closure. You know, we lived there. We were assigned there. My kids went to school there. We had a life there, and even though my life was mostly at work, you know, it's part of our history. So and I love Mexico, the country of Mexico. That's where my heritage is from. So yeah, a few years ago we went back and we actually visited the building where we used to live and the hotels that we were stayed at and all that. It was a great closure for my wife and kids.
But did you register under your own name?
I did. I went with some precautions with some employees of the U.S. Embassy that drove us around, and it was a quick visit, but we were very glad to have been able to do it.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being on our air today.
And I want to thank Alvina Alston for hooking us up. Alvina Alston from More Media, who is the one who introduced me.
City-based PR company.
City-based PR company who introduced me to Victor. And Victor, we will certainly have you on the show again because this has been one of the most exciting yet depressing hours I think Peter and I have ever spent with a radio show guest. So
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm always available to talk immigration, border security, and all that stuff.
I hope everybody has a great week. We'll be back next week, Ardina and I, with another edition of Westchester Eye on the Radio. Have a great week, everybody. Go Astros.